Hey everybody, I wanted to make this video to give everyone some tips on how to install the Curt 11363 Class 1 trailer hitch on the Fiat 500e. Mine happens to be a 2015. I really like this hitch. It's powder coated. It's got the 1¼ inch receiver, which is really the only thing you can put on this vehicle. Got it from Amazon for $117 with free shipping with Prime. Really like the finish. It has a very nice high gloss powder coat finish. I've installed several hitches over time, and this was by far the easiest to install. I'll speak briefly about the instructions, and then we'll move on to looking at the installation in a little more detail. You're going to be able to skip about 2/3 of these instructions, even though they include the 500e. Obviously, they had to talk about things like exhaust and heat shield due to other vehicles. So this first sheet is just basically an overview of what needs to be done. Obviously, you can ignore the muffler there. Then we've got this other sheet that starts by talking about the tools that you're going to need. You're going to find that you don't need the aviation shears nor the pry bar, and you also don't need the 11mm socket. You will need the 13mm and 11/16. The other thing that was different for me is that I drilled a 1/2 inch hole rather than a 7/16 hole. We'll talk about that in a little more detail later. In the installation walkthrough, step 1 and 2, you can basically ignore everything and start following in the note of step 2. And in the second page of the instructions, you can basically ignore the right side of the page. I started by bringing the vehicle up on a pair of ramps. You may be able to do it without doing this, but I found this made the job much easier. I was also surprised that neither the front nor the rear of the vehicle dragged or touched anything as I was bringing it onto the ramp. Looking at the underside, you'll note on the driver's side that the clips to hold the muffler up exist, both the one that's on the right side and on the left side of the muffler. In this image you can also see the 2 holes that are going to hold the driver's side of the hitch and the square rubber cap that needs to be temporarily removed to install the bolts. I say temporarily remove. The instructions indicate that the cap should be handed to the vehicle owner. I didn't like the idea of having an open hole behind the frame of the hitch where water could potentially, though unlikely, get in, and I saw no reason not to put that back. So once I put the bolts in place, I went ahead and put that cap back before I installed the hitch. Note that on the passenger side, the square rubber cap does not need to be removed at all for installation purposes, and therefore also remains in place. Back on the driver's side of the vehicle now, notice that the hole that's showing is the hole that's furthest away from the rear of the vehicle. This hole does not need to be enlarged. It's of the correct size for the bolt to go through. Notice that the other hole is, as pictured, has already been enlarged, and again I enlarged it to 1/2 inch. The reason I enlarged the hole to 1/2 inch is because when you take the 7/16 bolt and you thread it through the coiled portion of the fish wire, that has a dimension that's wider than 7/16, and it does not go through that hole easily. And remember, you're fishing that through, so it has to come through it relatively easily. Another cautionary note while we're on the subject of the fish wire: they're not reusable. Both of the fish wires broke on me during use. So in other words, they basically break apart once you try to remove the wire from the bolt after you've put it through the hole. Both fish wires which come with the kit are to be used on the driver's side of the vehicle. The reason for that is because the passenger side of the vehicle has threaded openings, so you'll be using the 13 millimeter bolts there. So the way to use the fish wire is to snake the V portion of the wire through the square opening towards the circular hole after you've enlarged it, for the one that has to be enlarged. Once you see it go past that little V portion, go past the hole, just sort of hook it back, and that V end will snake through the hole. Once the fish wire is snaked in the U shape through both holes, you're going to take the spacer and snake it through the wire, and you're going to take the 7/16 carriage bolt and screw it into that coiled portion. As you then carefully pull that through the square opening, remember that the spacer needs to be facing correctly. So if you look at this image, the spacer has to flip 180 degrees in order to be flat on the circular hole, so then the carriage bolt can then go through both the spacer and the opening. Then you just simply repeat on the other side for the other bolt, and this is what it should be. What it should look like when both bolts are through the opening with the spacers behind them. For the passenger side, you simply remove the 2 squares of metal tape, and basically that exposes the threads for the 2 hex bolts that are going to go in there. I'm showing the 1 hex bolt in here just for demonstration purposes. Of course, that only goes in once the hitch is in place. This short video shows the hitch in place. I highly recommend that you get a second pair of hands to help you hold it up. There's a large risk of driving those bolts on the driver's side back up through the body of the vehicle, and then you no longer have a viable fish wire to help you put them through. I did it on my own, but I don't recommend that. So you'd want to have someone that basically takes up the weight of the passenger side of the hitch while you guide the driver's side through the bolt. Once you have the nuts at least loosely on those bolts, then you can direct your attention to the passenger side and put the bolt and washer through that side of the vehicle, and then do the torquing. This one and the next few images are intended to demonstrate how the hitch looks on the vehicle and what to try to give an idea of the clearances. I think the fit's really good. They've done a good job dimensioning this to the vehicle. Some vehicles require some changes to this skirt on the back, I think the Abarth, but as you can see it looks really good on the 500e. Note that this image was taken with the hitch fully installed, and from this angle you can't see it at all. I hope this short video has been helpful. Don't hesitate to leave a question if you've got any, and if you found it helpful, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up. Thank you.